Hey everybody, welcome to the Ileostomy Guy podcast. How you doing? I'm tired. I'm tired of being quarantined. Hey, so Chrissy reached out to me. She is, her name is Life with Crohns on Instagram. She's had a similar journey as mine, and we're just going to visit a little bit about dealing with Crohn's disease, dealing with quarantine, dealing with life, and the ups and downs a little bit. So let's reach out to her. Chrissy, so tell me about yourself. How old are you?
I am 32.
32. Where you live? Are you in?
Yeah, so I live in San Diego, California, born and raised here. Never left, honestly, just been here my whole life.
Yeah. I've been in Wichita my whole life too. Born and raised, same city, same basic neighborhood, same basic zip code.
Nice. Same here.
I kind of lived on the other side of town for a little while when my wife and I first got married, but
yeah,
other than that, I've been right here in the same zip code for my whole life.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I lived on the other side of the city, still same city, half of my life, and same zip code. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So
elementary, middle school, and high school, all done here. Even I'm attending a university now, which is a drive for me, but everything, even when I was taking my prereqs out of community college, that was still like 15 minutes away. So
yeah. What are you going to school for?
My major is in, my bachelor's is in nutrition, but I essentially want to be a dietitian and specialize in IBD, so Crohn's disease.
Why dietitian? Why that area? What brought on that passion or interest?
Yeah. Simply because of Crohn's disease, but long story short goes, when I was first diagnosed, I was diagnosed in 2005. I was only 16 years old. Honestly, when they first diagnosed me, I didn't even know what Crohn's was, so I was still learning a lot about it. I didn't meet anyone with Crohn's maybe until my late 20s. So in the beginning years with this disease, like I said, it was still new. I remember I used to go to the library a lot and check out books, honestly, on how to heal myself. I hated it. I didn't like having Crohn's, so I did everything I can in my power to heal it naturally. I looked into herbs and nutrition and holistic stuff, natural alternatives, and that kind of sparked a passion for food and nutrition. And I didn't realize how big nutrition played a role in Crohn's. And the more I learned and realized that, that kind of drove me to want to get into it. So.
Are there certain foods and things that you knew right off from an early age, from 15, 16, that just really bothered you, where you just noticed, that's a no-go?
Yeah. So, gosh, when I was it took them several months to figure out what was going on with me. They thought I had the stomach flu, and everything I ate and drank, it just went right through me. Even drinking water caused like upset stomach, and I didn't even know what triggered it. I didn't even know what was going on with me. So I didn't know if it was food. I had no idea. So it took me for a while to figure out what would trigger it. I mean, stress for sure. Even though I was just a teenager and no one understood why I was so stressed. I think it was just feeling horrible and not knowing what was going on with me. That stressed me out.
Yeah.
And it was a very depressing, miserable time for me. So being young and trying to cope with something I didn't even know what it was really difficult. So the stress on top of that definitely aggravated my symptoms. But like I said, it was all new to me. It didn't take me years later to figure out what kind of foods would trigger. I mean, for sure, spicy foods, fried foods, processed foods. But I wasn't even given the option to even eat soup or drink water. Like, it was that bad. I couldn't tolerate anything. Like I said, it was really severe. So yeah, but nowadays I do know what triggers me, and I do stay away from it. But yeah.
But for the most part too, like I always like supplementing things like that with, but you still have Crohn's disease. So whereas we also have the responsibility of eating well, knowing what foods trigger us and how
Right.
to take care of our bodies, it's really easy with this disease to think, if I'm not eating exactly perfectly right, or I'm not lining everything up exactly, you can think it's my fault. Like I deserve this. I did that to have this happen.
Yep.
And you begin to really turn inward and to blame yourself. Did you notice that? Have you ever noticed that in your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we both shared that, you said you're a Catholic and I grew up a cradle Catholic. So, um,
Yeah. There you go.
representing.
That's right. That's cool.
So, it was crazy because even I didn't understand suffering very well then. I was probably just naive to it. I never thought anything like that would happen to me. So when something bad happened to me, I was like, oh, I must have done something really bad. I'm being punished for this. So I internalized that. I truly believed it for the longest time. And of course, now I know that's not true. But yeah, and it was I remember I was just kind of reviewing. I was, so I read your book and I highlighted a lot, like everything that hit home for me. I'm just like, yep, me too. Yeah, that's me.
That's awesome.
And yeah, and there was this one thing you said. You said I shoved it all into a dark corner, never brought it up to anyone. And that's exactly what I did. I was ashamed, embarrassed, and I had 2 years actually not even a year and a half into my diagnosis, I had my ostomy. So I was still processing that I had this disease, which I still didn't understand. And I was a teenager. And then I had this ostomy, and it really rocked my world. It like messed with my insecurities. It added to my insecurities. And I felt embarrassed, ashamed, and just a whole lot of emotions. And I definitely just hid it. And on the surface, I seemed okay. But deep down inside, I was just a wreck. It was really hard to process it all.
You are beautiful. You are also, in being attractive, are able to conceal a lot of your suffering, and in a very real way, to not only hide it, but to almost become duplicitous in your ability to kind of have a separate world, almost like having two lives, where it is very easy to not share our life with those closest to us, which also kind of separates us from the world, and it affects our ability to have good, authentic relationships, I think. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Thank you, but I agree. I mean, in my early 20s, just growing up, I struggled with my own identity and having insecurities, and I dealt with some bullying. So that aside from having this new disease, I just changed a lot about how I already felt about myself.
Yeah.
My self-esteem was just at that point lower than low. So I struggled a lot with that. In my beginning years, I didn't think I was beautiful. I didn't think anyone could ever accept me. I just thought I was just damaged goods and no one would ever look past this. And I mean, the dating world, that's a whole nother story. But in my early 20s, it was a really dark time for me. So I'm sorry, I don't know where I'm going with this, but
Okay.
try to stay on topic. But yeah, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. So elaborate just for 2 minutes on what you just said in regards to when you're in your 20s, it was just a really dark place. And I'm only wanting, I'm not trying to draw anything out of you besides the fact that that's a very, our younger years are impressionable ages. And then when we get in our 20s, that's, for you and I, that's a time period where we're supposed to know what we want to do and be, and things ought to start kind of being, you ought to be able to see a little bit in what's going on and where you want to go in life. And there's so much confusion in regards to not knowing who you are or being incredibly insecure in who you are at that age, and how it affects your job searching, your ability to go to school, and all of those things. So can you elaborate just a little bit about, maybe why in hindsight you think it affected you so much at that age?
Yeah, well, I feel like our early 20s are a time to kind of go out and discover yourself. And I mean, it's the beginning of our young adult years, and that's when everyone's going off to college, starting jobs, and learning to be independent. And I didn't have that option. I dropped so I barely graduated high school, and I barely made it through my senior year. And I managed to get through the summer with flares in and out of the hospital. And I wanted to have fun, and I couldn't do that. And I was being forced to adult and make life-changing decisions. And that was really hard. It was definitely really hard.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, you read my story, and that's right around the time I started kind of, I'll use the phrase self-destructing. I was just going through a lot and emotionally struggling, accepting a lot of things. And I just, in order to hang out with my friends, I needed to embrace a life that my body couldn't handle. And I just kind of, well, I guess I did what I thought I needed to do. I battled through. I kind of just got over it to have fun for the sake of, I mean, I'm a needy person. I like attention. I want friends. I like to be social.
Yeah.
And I thrive from that kind of attention and affection. And it was just so hard for me to realize, to accept. And being Catholic and reflecting as an older adult, it was such a gift if I would have embraced it earlier on, because it would have kept me from a lot of things that I really struggled with anyways. Like I really struggled with a lot of things in regards to that life. And this was one way that it could have steered me right in the direction I needed to go if I would have cooperated with it.
Yeah. I can relate. I can definitely relate to that too. Being a cradle Catholic, I felt like I only understood things on the surface. I was pretty involved in my parish, but I feel like there were just topics I did not understand, and one in particular being suffering. And I didn't know how to cope well with the disease and the emotional and mental toll it took on me too. Yeah, it was a very slow process to understand redemptive suffering and to accept it. And I remember it didn't really hit me until I was slowly easing my way into getting involved in the parish and just trying to dive into my faith, not really knowing or understanding what it was doing for me. But I remember I started going to Bible study, and I remember one time after Bible study, I asked to speak to priest, and he was a young priest, and I was kind of opening up to him and venting. He told me, I still remember it till this day, he told me, well, you can either accept it and find joy and happiness in it, or you can, resent it and just avoid it and continue to be miserable. I'm like, wow, it's really that simple. And yeah, it took me some time to meditate and reflect on that and try and understand it. And it took me some time, but it definitely impacted my life spiritually. And I eventually came to accept a lot about my health, and I noticed a big change in my attitude, and the way I was responding to a lot of things. So, yeah.
Very cool. when with understanding suffering in my world, and not necessarily on the redemptive suffering side, but just in general to how we experience it. So
Yeah.
like you and I, people who are dealing with something like we deal with and then are trying to live a normal life like it doesn't exist, we suffer a lot intentionally because we're trying to live that life, right? So I saw it as I am okay with the suffering that I choose. I'm fine with a 4-day hangover and a possible hospital stay for the sake of a 2-day bender with a group of high school buddies. And I'm fine with that. I can accept that. It's it's the other stuff where Crohn's kicks in, where I start getting bitter. And once I saw the imbalance in how I saw suffering, like I was okay with it in certain ways, and other ways I wasn't. Like I started comparing it with, I used to hate smoking cigarettes. That was disgusting. It was so gross. There's nothing good or attractive about it. But I forced myself to do it over and over because I was dating a girl that smoked and my friends were smoking too. And that was like, I related. But then when I understood redemptive suffering and that God has given me this cross, this gift for a very specific reason, it now I can choose to accept this and reject all the suffering I was just letting flood into my life, creating more insecurities. I was able to go, okay, I guess I'm fine slowing down. That's another suffering,
Yeah.
staying close to home. But now I realized that I'm okay with suffering as long as I'm choosing it. Well, now that I'm choosing this,
Yeah.
I'm more okay with it.
Yeah. No, it's funny you say that. Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. I wasn't given a choice to, well, I just knew I couldn't smoke and drink. In my early 20s, I tried so hard to do what everyone else was doing because I just wanted to be normal. I wanted to be accepted.
Yeah.
I remember I smoked a lot of hookah just because it was really popular and there's this big hype. Everyone was smoking hookah then.
Yeah.
And I'm Middle Eastern, so it's something that was just commonly done with everyone, and all my cousins smoked, and I wanted to do what they were doing, and I did. And I remember every time I smoked, I felt horrible. Like I remember I was smoking right in the beginning, around the time when I was first discovering, or when I first had my fistula. I didn't even know I had a fistula then. I just knew there was something wrong down there.
Right.
And every time I smoked, it was weird. The pain got worse. And a year or two later, I just knew I just couldn't do that anymore. And I never had the option to live that lifestyle. The only thing I probably did to help me cope, it might have not been the best option, was sneaking out to go hang out with friends. And when my parents found out, or they knew I came home late, they get so upset because, of course, them being parents, they're extremely overprotective over me, because of my health and the world out there. And I grew up kind of in the strict culture, so that was kind of not acceptable to them, aside from them just being protective and worrying about my health. I just wanted to break free from all of that. I just wanted to, like I said, feel normal and enjoy myself, and feel like a 19, 20-year-old like everyone else did. And I used to go out dancing, and I never like got drunk, or like I said, I smoked, but like that was my way out. But I did find later on that was destructive, because I was just kind of I was kind of suppressing what I was dealing in life, and that was my only way to cope with it, just to do things I enjoy, so I don't feel the emotions and the mental pain of and the misery from my disease.
Yeah.
It kind of just numbed it down. Yeah.
When did you start, or had you always, when did you start developing a spiritual life, a prayer life through this process?
Yeah, so I remember, so after my surgery,
When was that?
I'm sorry, I had my first surgery, my temporary loop ileostomy in 2006. I was 18. Initially, our plan for that, my ostomy then, was for it to be temporary, but that never worked out because my fistula never closed. So I kept this temporary loop ileotomy for like the next 8-9 years before I made it permanent a few years ago. But anyways, I'm gonna rewind back. So I had the surgery. I was in pretty bad shape, and I remember you said like I can't remember what you said this, but I felt the same way. I guess basically you were just up for anything at this point. I remember you were saying like even ostomy surgery it sounded like a pretty good idea when you were just I'm sorry, I'm trying to collect my thoughts. I think you had tried everything and you were facing surgery as like your last resort, and that felt like a great idea then, even though you might have refused it in the beginning. Yeah, and I kind of went through that too. I kept refusing the surgery, and at that point I just gave up. I'm like, yeah, let's do it, anything to get me out of this. And then after that, I still was dealing with the flare-up then, and Remicade stopped working for me. So Humira was not approved, and my doctors were fighting to try and get that for me.
Yeah.
And I remember I wasn't feeling well. And then once I started the Humira and I started to feel a little better, it took a few months to kick in. I remember it was just about the beginning of summer, and there was this pilgrimage for young adults at my parish I grew up in. And I was just desperate for a way to get out of the house or some fun. And I figured, it's with the church, I can't go wrong, I'm going to convince my parents if I can go. So my sister and I signed up, and we went. And I didn't realize it was going to be like a retreat where they were going to take away our phones and our devices, and we were going to just kind of look inwards and into our sufferings, into our pain. And it was kind of like a slap in the face, like, wake up, Chrissy. And it was awesome because we went through this pilgrimage. We started in San Diego and visited every mission on our way up to San Francisco.
Oh, wow.
And we started each day with mass, and it was like perfect medicine I needed right then and there, even though I wasn't planning or expecting it. So that was my little wake-up call.
Yeah.
And that kind of just drove me to dive deeper and deeper into it. So
that's really cool. Did you say that you went with a group from your parish?
Yeah. So there was probably a good 50 of us, just young adult between 18 and 20 something, late 20s all together.
Could you guys talk to each other, or was it a total silent retreat?
We could talk to each other, but we had small groups. We were assigned small groups, and we had a leader. And anytime we went to, so we started with mass, and then we did a little tour around the mission, and then our leader would have like a small talk, and then just like spiritual activities within our group. And usually those small talks and those activities required us to kind of open up. Most of us would share some inner pains or personal struggles and suffering. And I remember I had never spoken to anyone about what I was dealing with. So anytime I try to open up about it, I cried.
Yeah.
And that's when I knew like I wasn't coping well with it. And it was like, it really was like the first time I was opening up about what I was dealing with, and it was really hard for me.
Did you meet somebody or one or two people that you still keep in touch with today? Did you have any cool?
Yeah, I still do. I grew up in a very close-knitted Chaldean community. That's my ethnicity. I grew up in a Chaldean rite, which is an Eastern rite. And yeah, I still keep in good touch with a lot of the girls. So it, like, if you were a female, you were put into a female group. So a lot of the girls I still keep in touch with.
That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's a normal, how does your prayer life, from going through all of that, and now you've been dealing with all kinds of other stuff, and you're kind of in another rut cycle of dealing with this illness and trying to there's a whole bunch of uncertainty and unknowns for you. So how in times like right now do you deal with A, your suffering, but B, continuing to trust and have faith in maintaining a prayer life?
Yeah. So one of my weaknesses is, so whenever I get bad news, I learn something new about my health. I have a bad habit. I tend to just internalize it all, and I think of the worst case scenario, and I will feed into fear and worry, anxiety. And that's my weakness. That's just something that I've just commonly done everything. Every time I receive bad news about my health, I don't know how to internalize. Sometimes I didn't even have the chance to slow down and take it in. It was just like, okay, what's next? Surgery, procedure, what's our next new medication? Yeah. But when I get the chance to stop and cope with it, I don't know how to cope with it. Yeah. So yeah, I definitely won't do well with it at first. It'll take me a few days just to slowly process it. And I'm just like, okay, Chrissy, we got to turn to God now. We got to take this to prayer. Work on your patience, your trust in Him. And I'm a visual type of person, so I enjoy watching videos. I have a few favorite people I enjoy going to. I love listening to Bishop Barron, Mother Angelica, a few of her books or books about her. Gosh, the lives of the saints who endured suffering. Yeah. Their example and their model for enduring difficult times definitely helps me through. So,
can you recall any one-liners or things that have kind of stood out that a particular saint or two has said that you just kind of cling to and repeat over and over to yourself?
Yeah, no, it's funny you say that, because so not this past Easter, but a year ago, it was Good Friday, and I had gone to a Good Friday service, and I think the priest, spoke about suffering, and of course it's Good Friday, so it's very relevant to his talk and Christ's suffering, his passion. Yeah. And I was kind of reflecting on that, taking in what he said and, relating it to my personal suffering. And then I came home, and I think it must have, on social media, I came across an article from EWTN, and it was about Mother Angelica and her last days, right before she died. And I was reading it, and she mentioned something about her suffering and how excruciating her pain was. And then I can't remember the article exactly, but it went into describing, or I think it was Mother Angelica who explained how her excruciating pain meant something to her. And if you break down the word excruciating, it all goes back to the cross. I can't remember in Latin what it means. I think it means like suffering. I'm probably butchering it, but it all goes back to the cross. And then that just hit me. Yeah. Because oftentimes when I describe my pain, I'm always describing it in excruciating terms, like, oh, it's severe, it hurts really bad, it's excruciating. And I went downstairs and I'm like, Mom, what is one word, one term that I often use or say when I'm describing my pain? And I'm like, isn't it excruciating? You often hear that, don't you? And she said, yes. I'm like, oh, it all goes back to the cross. Sorry. And then Bishop Barron, just the other day, I can't remember if it was this homily for Easter. It might have been, but he said something and he mentioned Christ's pain and his passion, how excruciating it is. And I'm just like,
Yeah. Yeah. That's so cool.
yeah, I'll have to look into it and I'll have to send you maybe that article or just kind of the meaning behind what excruciating means.
Yeah. That'd be really interesting. I've never heard that before.
Yeah.
So I want you to describe two things. Number one, how you think you have become a better person because of your illness.
Mm-hmm.
What the number one thing you think, and then I also want what you think other people see as the best thing you've gotten from having Crohn's.
Well, it certainly has been a blessing in disguise. I'll be honest, I don't always think that. And there are definitely times when I'm just like, gosh, just give me a break. But if it wasn't for Crohn's, I wouldn't be who I am. And as cliche as that sounds, it's very true to who I am because, well, first, I wouldn't have discovered my passion for what I want to do and how I want to help people who deal with something that I understand firsthand. It's opened my eyes and just to understanding, just having perspective and understanding suffering and being empathetic to other people and their suffering. I'm sorry, what was the second question?
And what do you think other people would see as the best trait you've acquired from dealing with it? Your family members, those who are close to you, would it be the same answer or would they see something else?
My family and my friends I think if I would put it into one word, I think they would say my strength, my endurance to deal with everything I've dealt with. I was just speaking to my best friend earlier and she's like, you're just one of the strongest women I know. I'm not the strongest woman in the world, but I know in my world, amongst my friends and my loved ones, what I deal with is always like, gosh, I don't know how to explain this without sounding like I'm boasting, but it's always beyond what they can comprehend because it's like a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they are always like, gosh, you're so strong. I can't imagine having to go through that. You know, you're one of the strongest people I've known. Yeah. So I hear that often.
You know, it's funny because we all hear that are dealing with stuff like this. We hear it often. And like everybody else, we're waking up with these problems. This is just me. This is just you. This is what you deal with. And in a very real way, like I say this all the time, so I'll just say it anyways, but it's like my older brother, he explained to me one time at AA meetings, everybody puts all their problems verbally out there on the table. And you look around and you see everyone's problems and you want all your problems right back. And so even those people who look up to us or see, you know, they're afraid of what we're dealing with. It beautifully reveals how God doesn't choose these things lightly. He very perfectly chooses suffering for those, for his children. And there's things in other people's lives that I don't want and I couldn't deal with. And they look at me and they're like, I don't want that. And it's the most amazing thing to kind of see, you know, there's this awe about it. But then when you look inside yourself, you're kind of like, that's just me. I just wake up and do it the best I can. And I don't think I'm really doing that great a job.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, just within the Crohn's community on my Crohn's page that I started several years ago, just on there, I see a lot of suffering. And I see the severity of Crohn's and what these patients go through. And even my case is severe, but I've seen people with like who have surpassed 20 to 50 surgeries. And I'm just like, I've had 2 major surgeries. Case often get that. It blows my mind with, like I said, just with this disease, how bad it can get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And quickly, like I can forget how painful things are. And it's in a lot of ways, you know, I've heard that my mom has 8 children. My wife and I have 4, that you forget the pain of childbirth after you have them. And it's like with Crohn's, as it slowly enters my world, I can begin to deal with it and battle it and grow a tolerance and stuff. But then when it goes away for a little while and it comes back, I feel like the biggest pansy and having to re-accept and relearn to carry. I'm like, oh my goodness, I don't know how I did that for years. I dealt with that for months at a time. My goodness.
Oh yeah, that hits home for me too. Gosh, like I was in remission for 7-8 years, and the worst part I dealt with was probably my fistula. Like my Crohn's was in remission. From like between 2007 and 2014, I was great. I went back to school. I was working. I don't know how many certificates I got. Like I was just go, 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 go. I achieved so much. And I think just for me, it was just a way for me to get my life back and fill in what I missed out on. And it was great. Like when I think the best years of my life, it wasn't even before my Crohn's. It was like those 7 to 8 years. I did so much and I appreciate it. And even between all that I was doing, I was still doing procedures and operations on the fistula just to close it. And that was a whole nother battle. But it was great until I hit a really bad flare in 2014, which ultimately led into removing my colon, my rectum, and making my ostomy permanent. And then once I dealt with that severe flare again, I was like, how did I do that in my early 20s? I'm older and supposedly wiser now, and I don't even know how to deal with this anymore.
Yeah.
It's like I'm learning it all over again, and it was really scary. I never thought I would go through that again. Yeah, it was really difficult.
Okay, so give me your top 3 people who get, when you're offering up, you know, we as Catholics use the phrase offered up. Offered up. And but I grew up hearing it. I haven't started using it for my kids that much yet. But who are the top 3, or what are the top 3 people or reasons that you offer up your suffering?
Top 3. For my grandfather, he passed away summer 2017, right when I was flaring up, and I had C. diff. So it was a really messy time. I didn't do very well when he passed away. So, and I was very close to him. So he's the first person I think of. Second, Souls in Purgatory. And third, third can be, there's so many people.
Yeah.
But I'd say the souls of my family. You know, I pray for their souls to be in heaven. So
that's really cool. Okay. Well, how about if, you know, we're stubborn when we're younger. You were diagnosed in your teenage years. Knowing you and your own personality, what's something you would tell your younger self that she would hopefully hear? It would break through your stubborn head, and you would hopefully hear to kind of give you a little bit lighter of a cross for your journey.
Yeah, gosh. I'm gonna be honest. I've never thought about this. I might need a second to think about this.
So like with me, I'm gonna totally distract your thought, and maybe it'll trigger a thought. But like for me, so one thing I wish I would have been told, and it had to have come from a certain person, not one person, but it would have had to have come from one of my brothers.
Okay.
Because I looked up to them so much. I have 7 siblings. I'm the youngest boy, so I'm number 7, and they're all older. I looked up to them. I mean, they were idols in a lot of ways to me. And it probably would have had to have come from them, though probably not. What do I know? But if they would have come to me and said, Austin, the best thing you can do in your life is to focus on a prayer life and a relationship with our God, I would have listened and I would have heard them, and it would have came from a place that I would have respected. And that's not saying shame on them for not doing it. I just know that if I would have had that from that resource at that time, it would have rattled my cage enough that I would hope and would think that I would make different decisions that really, really brought a lot of pain into my world. And so that to me is something that I do now as an adult. Like I have 20 some nieces and nephews, and I have great relationships with all of them, and I try and be the person I wish I would have had around when I was that age, because I was stubborn and I was arrogant, and I thought my shit didn't stink, and that's just me. And I try to break through to especially the hardest ones of them for that, because I know how impactful a strong, solid, spiritual leader, male leader is in someone's life.
That's powerful. Yeah, I think that definitely sparked something in my mind, and I say along the same lines, I'd probably tell myself something the same. I'm the oldest, so other than my parents, I didn't really have anyone to look up to, so I was pretty alone. And I have 3 younger sisters. There's 4 girls in the family. So I know. He's bald. Does that tell you something?
I got 3 girls, but I got a full bush up here.
Hold on to that.
Golly.
There's 5 girls, including my mom, and 2 female dogs. So
that's for the bird, man. I've always had male dogs. I was like, if we're having girls, I'm having a male dog.
That's smart. I would tell myself to keep my eyes on God, and I would also remind myself of God's love. I never understood God's love for myself because I didn't even love myself. I didn't accept myself. I'd tell myself, God loves you even if you don't. He accepts you even if no one else does. I dealt with a lot of rejection, and it was always related to my ostomy, my health. So I would tell myself anything that would comfort me, or probably prepare my mind and my heart to face certain situations like that when it came when it came to rejection and acceptance and self-love and all that.
Very cool. Chrissy, thank you very much. I appreciate you taking some time and visiting with me and opening up a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure to doing this with you.
If someone wants to follow you or look you up, where can they find you on Instagram? What's your page that you set up?
Yeah, so I run an Instagram page dedicated to Crohn's. I share my daily Crohn's struggle on there, and a lot of education and humor just to help people. It's called @Life with Crohn's, just Life with Crohn's. So.
Well, very cool. Thank you very much, and I will keep you in my prayers, and you do the same for me.
Thank you. And I hope, for sure.
I hope everything you're going through, we understand that there's a purpose. Being Catholic, I feel like, I was told once we have a full deck of cards, And I in regards to suffering, because it's something the world doesn't understand, we've been given an incredible gift with our faith and being able to understand the power we have in suffering with love. And so I think it's beautiful that you on the other side of the country can embrace that same cross, and we can suffer with love together for those that we care for. So very cool. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Amen to that. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, have a good day. Thanks, Chrissy. I appreciate it.
Thank you. You have a good night.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye.